Managing wildlife can certainly take some interesting turns. In the West, there's a constant struggle to give wild animals a chance, to balance their needs with ours. Outdoor Idaho explores some of the ways folks are working for wildlife.
Funding for Outdoor Idaho is made possible by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, by the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore's legacy of helping to build the great state of Idaho, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
There's one thing most of us can agree upon. We humans have an obligation to wildlife. Whether it's a biblical admonition or a feeling that wild animals are a mirror into our own humanity, we want to do right by wildlife. Hi, I'm Bruce Reichert, and welcome to Outdoor Idaho. That's particularly true here at the World Center for Birds of Prey, where caretakers are working hard to reverse the downward spiral of certain raptor species.
California condors are not the most glamorous species. Having shifted gears from working with a species like the peregrine falcon that is a real charismatic figure stone, shifting to a bald red head that, as we like to say, is a face only a mother could love, was extremely difficult.
But the Peregrine Fund, which operates the World Center for Birds of Prey, has been wildly successful with North America's largest bird.
The California condor was once at a population low of 22 individuals in 1982, and now we have over 375 California condors flying free. This year here at the facility in Boise, Idaho, we've already hatched 17 California condor chicks. And when you compare that to a population low of 22 individuals, that's quite a feat and quite an accomplishment. We're seeing successes. We're seeing birds breed on their own in the wild. But right now, the limiting factor for California condors is really lead poisoning.
These scavenger birds ingest the lead from carcasses left behind by hunters. Cafferty says non-lead ammunition is one of the solutions that will keep this species from extinction.
Okay, Whiskers, you get a special goodbye from me because you and I went through hell together. Special, special bear.
Sally Mon, the bear lady of Garden City, is saying goodbye to her bears. It's time for them to move on. It happens every year about this time, but this is what she lives for. This is her calling.
It's a very big day. It's what you work for. It's what the bears work for. People say, don't you get attached and isn't it hard when you let them go? I don't let them go. They were always meant to go. And frankly, with bears, you're ready for them to go.
These are Washington bears, brought to her last fall by that state's Fish and Wildlife Department. Some were 3 months old, others 6 to 8 months old when they arrived here. Now they're more than a year old. The biologists anesthetize and weigh each bear. They take measurements, attach radio collars and ear tags. It's all part of preparing them for a return to freedom. For Sally, it's the end of a long and arduous process.
When I'm at work at my desk and I'm watching them on the monitor, they're wrestling and chasing at full speed up and down from 10:30, 11 in the morning till close to dusk. I'm exhausted just watching them. This is the rowdiest group of bears in 22 years I've ever had. Washington bears wrestle and play very hard, but these guys broke that record a long time ago.
These orphans went through hibernation right here. And records suggest after more than 200 black bears over more than 20 years that most of them will do very well when returned to the wild. The money to do all this comes primarily from donations. Sally estimates each bear costs about $2,500 to house and feed. But as far as she's concerned, it's worth every penny.
Once they're weaned, we keep all people away from them. So when we go to feed and clean, it's in and out as quick as we can. Occasionally I have bears that challenge you, and that can be intimidating if you're not used to working with bears. So I may be 5'2" and he may be as tall as I am, way more than I am, but I'm the one in charge and I let him know it. And they respect that. They're just adorable, wonderful creatures, and they have such a spirit about them, and very smart, very intelligent. You know, I can't even imagine my life without bears. I think most of us recognize that to a wild animal, freedom is everything, whether it's 10 minutes or 3 years. So if you give them that 10 minutes or that 3 years, that's what it's about.
There's one more thing that has to happen to these healthy, well-fed bears, and it may seem cruel, but the dogs and the yelling and being shot at just might keep these bears safe for a couple more years.
I wish I could guarantee them 30 years of life. I can't. So once that door opens and they're released, my door shuts. They're no longer your responsibility, they're their own responsibility. They take charge of their own lives, and you have no control over what happens.
The Payette National Forest in central Idaho covers a lot of territory. More than 2 million acres of mountains and lakes and forest. Perfect country to get lost in. And in the wintertime, the Payette offers some of the best snowmobiling and backcountry skiing in the nation. This is also home to a curious animal that most of us have never seen in the wild, the wolverine, North America's biggest and most ferocious weasel. Wolverines are not on the endangered species list, but they are candidates for protection. Habitat fragmentation and changes in weather patterns have helped reduce their numbers to maybe as low as several hundred in the continental U.S. That's why in neighboring states like Oregon, where the wolverine is a state-threatened species, it's rare to see one, even with special cameras set up in remote areas. But things are a little different here in Idaho, where the North American wolverine is classified as a protected non-game species. Tiny log structures like this one in the Payette, the Boise, and the Sawtooth National Forests are used to track wolverines as part of an intriguing multi-year research study. One that tracks not only wolverines, but also snowmobiles, and asks the question, can the two coexist?
The ISSA and some other people were, well, why can't we actually see if the wolverines and the snowmobiles can work together? And so that's actually why
Ben Rooney is a volunteer with Round River Conservation Studies. It's his job to convince snowmobilers to attach a GPS data logger to their machines. It's hard not to be fascinated by one of the most elusive and fierce creatures on Earth. They weigh only about 30 pounds, but wolverines have been known to back down a wolf and even a grizzly bear. They don't hibernate, they can easily travel 20 miles a day through snow, and they eat almost anything. In fact, their Latin name, gulo, means glutton. The State Snowmobile Association has actually helped fund this study, along with the Central Idaho Recreation Coalition and Brundage Mountain Resort. Even the local business establishments in McCall are helping out, providing places for recreationists to return those data loggers. It seems everyone will have a stake in the research and the outcome.
We're hoping that we can come up with some good science that will actually know what kind of an impact winter recreation has on wolverine. If we do have closures, and we respect those and accept those because it'll be based on good science, we truly don't want to impact the wolverine.
Tony Folsom is a trapper by trade. He understands that the superhuman nose of a wolverine is also its weakness. This smelly mess of animal scraps will lure a wolverine from miles away.
We have these traps, look like little log homes, the live traps. We put bait in the back, preferably beaver. We lure it up really heavy so they can smell it a long ways away.
Since joining this study, Folsom has learned to identify individual wolverines.
We have little pet names for each one. This certain female can be a pest. It's hard to keep her out of traps. One male, he just eats my traps.
It's morning in McCall and time to check the traps.
The first thing I do every morning when I get up is look at my emails.
Kim Heinemeyer is the lead scientist for the Central Idaho Wolverine Project. This new technology allows her to check traps without ever leaving home.
These are actually satellite-based boxes and automatically, instantaneously send me an email when the lid has closed. Hey crew.
Heinemeyer shares this rental house with the rest of her team, and each morning they gather to plan the day's activities.
Pearl Creek and Lower Lick Creek.
Some of them will check the traps that have been sprung. Others, like volunteer Drew Chambers, will gather the data from all those GPS units, allowing him to create a recreation map of the entire area.
We can combine that map with our Wolverine data to make a multi-layered file that helps us compare where the Wolverines go to where the snowmobiles go. And we can even compare that by date because they're all dated files. So we can see where snowmobiles are at any certain time and where the Wolverines are at any certain time.
Turns out Wolverines do share one thing with winter recreationists: a love of deep snow.
They're built for snow, so number one, they can handle the snow like a lot of other animals can't. So they're filling a niche that they have less competition in the winter for finding food and that kind of thing. For females to den, they need snow cover that's going to persist into the spring and maybe even early June.
Like so many other scientists, Diane Evans-Mack became intrigued by this secretive creature and started tracking it with motion-sensitive cameras.
It works great if you can keep the bait hanging in the tree, but you've got everything after it, martens and fox. Then, of course, a few wolverines showing up on the cameras.
One of the problems with the live traps is that you never really know what triggers them. Only a long snowmobile ride can tell you that.
Most of our traps are set off of groomed snowmobile routes that are maintained for snowmobile recreation. So we're right in the middle of it, and so are the Wolverines. Yeah, it's a lot of hard work. 7 days a week, you don't get a break. Every day you're out here checking traps.
The researchers have spent most of the morning getting here, but as often happens, a small agile marten has triggered the trap and escaped.
Got a marten again. Darn it. The good thing is they're out being Wolverines. They're not hanging around our traps. They're wearing our GPS collars and basically working for us, collecting good data for us. So you got to be happy about that.
But we came to see a Wolverine, and finally, several days later, our luck changes.
How you doing, big guy?
Up a hair.
It's a young male, and he is not happy. The goal is to radio collar the animal. But first, they have to anesthetize it with the drug ketamine, putting a jab stick into its shoulder or flank.
Cooperate, it'll just go fast.
But this Wolverine has other ideas.
Got him.
As the drug takes effect, the researchers with lowered voices quickly get to work, preparing a warm bed for the drowsy animal.
There's our sweet boy. Let's get the weight on him.
They will weigh and measure the Wolverine, protect its eyes, and keep this 27-pound ball of potential fury warm and safe during this critical time.
He was a pretty feisty Wolverine, so he was a little challenging, made us work. We thought we probably had most of the animals collared that are in the area, and today we got a new Wolverine that we haven't seen before all season. Now we have a collar on him, and we'll be able to follow his movements and see if he's a resident animal here.
This particular Lick Creek drainage has yielded 5 Wolverines this season. It's also a favorite area for snowmobilers and backcountry skiers.
When we started this project, we didn't know if we would even find Wolverines in a landscape that's recreated. And so what we have found is that we have resident Wolverines in these recreated landscapes, and pretty heavily recreated landscapes. These animals are tough. Most animals leave this country in the winter or they hibernate through it. And wolverines are here all year round. The movements of our radio tag animals are just so impressive. They cover a lot of ground. Their little legs are like 10 inches long, and they're moving through this country at an average of 20 miles a day. It's pretty impressive for a little animal like that. Wolverines aren't as big as a lot of people think, but their little personalities are enormous.
I'm sure you all know what we're here to do today. We're going to catch some deer. What we're after today is 15 fawns and 3 does.
It's become a winter ritual here in eastern Idaho. State biologists and volunteers load up sleds and equipment for a chance to capture deer on the run. It may not look like it at times, but it's all part of an organized attempt to radio collar animals in a humane and inexpensive way to help track their winter range movements.
We couldn't do this without volunteers. We just don't have the funding, we don't have the money, but we always have plenty of help to do this.
The purpose of this collaring is to monitor overwinter survival of fawns in particular. We did collar some adult does as well. We're trying to do the best we can to effectively manage this species, and to get a handle on overwinter survival and how the population comes into the next year is very important to that management.
It's a complicated process that takes hours of prep work in knee-deep snow. Crews unravel nets and strategically string them out in a funnel pattern that will, theoretically at least, guide the animals into the waiting arms of the volunteers. The nets are raised with slender sticks that will easily collapse when an animal hits the net.
They think they can go through it. They actually won't hit it that hard. They're going to run right up to it and they're going to try to poke their head through one of those squares and jump. And the net's going to fold on top of them just like a sandwich. And at that point, we want the people that are closest to it to get up and quickly move to the deer and hold it down. But don't do a belly flop on the deer, especially these little fawns, because you can hurt them.
Oh, and there's one more thing, the helicopter.
As we're hunkered down beside the sagebrush, kind of in silence, everybody's kind of hushed, waiting for the deer to come over the hill. You're sitting there listening to the helicopter, trying to see where it is, kind of guess where the deer are coming from. And then you finally see them coming up over the ridge, and it's exciting. Your heart starts pounding, start pumping a little bit, you get excited. You're trying to lay still and quiet so they don't spook the deer.
What happens next is pure chaos.
There's another one. More coming in. More coming in. We've got somebody on it.
It sounds expensive, but consider the amount of deer we get in such a short amount of time. It turns out to be one of the most cost-effective ways as well. It seems quite abrupt when they hit the net, like it would cause injury. This project's been going on statewide for a number of years now with thousands of deer collared and caught, and our mortality is very, very low compared to other capture methods.
It can be shocking to watch, but it's relatively harmless for the deer as long as its hooves are held in check with a mugger's hug.
The mugger is the one that tackles and holds and subdues the deer. Then usually another person processes the deer and puts the radio collar on and takes the measurements.
This surgical tubing here, it'll rot out in about 6 to 8 months probably, and so we'll go pick this collar back up and redeploy it.
That was unbelievable. It was the best experience I've had in ages.
It's an unforgettable experience, one that truly calls to those who will work for the wild.
We have mule deer and wildlife everywhere, but it's not that often that you get that up close and personal with the animals.
There's really no lake in Idaho that can compare to the high catch rate of Henry's Lake. Cutthroats, brookies, rainbow cutthroat hybrids, they're all here in size and length that lure anglers from all over the country. Because of its location and elevation, the lake freezes over early and can stay frozen till nearly summer. But even with 4 feet of snow on the lake and an occasional moose, there is life under the ice, as hundreds of large trout thrash their way up the fish ladder to spawn, right into the waiting hands of a room full of biologists and volunteers.
Fish come up the ladder into a trap, and we sort the fish. We identify females from the males, and we put them in a different location within the trap. On a normal year, we'll trap 3,000 or 4,000 fish. So the fish are moving up the ladder, and we're spawning 2 or 3 days a week, and we'll take about 4 to 5 million eggs in the next month and a half or so, and so it'll be very active.
Damon Keene has been part of this March Madness for more than a decade.
I'm amazed at the size of the fish and what a terrific fishery we have here at Henry's Lake. These fish average anywhere from 17 to 20 inches. We do see some 7, 8, 10-pound fish come up the ladder, and so there they are, big fish. It's a tremendous fishery, and many people, I think, believe that. We have all the volunteers that we would ever need, and we have usually more than we need. We never turn away volunteers. People are just very anxious to help. We really couldn't do the project without the volunteers.
These eggs are shipped to the Mackey hatchery, but eventually 95% of them will return here to Henry's Lake as fingerlings to complete the cycle. But some will have a higher calling in Idaho's high mountain lakes. The hike to Brocky Lake in the Copper Basin near Mackey, Idaho is about 1.5 miles in length, and it's pretty much straight up. You go from 8,000 feet to 10,000 with very few switchbacks. Now pack on an extra 30 pounds of water weight and you've got yourself a tough, quad-killing climb. Biologists Dan Guerin and Greg Scobie are taking baby cutthroat trout to Brocky Lake.
We brought 1,500 fish in here today. Of course, they have to come with water, and water's pretty heavy. So we have fairly heavy packs and a lot of elevation gain, and it can be a little difficult.
Turning back is not an option. This cargo has only a 5-hour survival window.
The longer they stay in the bag, the higher the potential for mortality. Anytime you introduce a fish into a new environment, especially something that's spent all its life in a hatchery, it takes them a little time to adjust. We put the bags in the water and let the temperature in the bag and the temperature of the water kind of equalize.
While the temperature equalizes, the biologists check the lake for signs of camping activity. And they also track the progress of fish stocked 3 years ago.
We set these gill nets to capture as many fish as we can, and each gill net has different sizes of mesh, and they can catch different sizes of fish. We found all the same size fish. They were all about 10 inches. Real consistent with what we would expect from our stocked fish 3 years later, and pretty much suggests, based on that alone, that natural reproduction is kind of low.
They do a walking inspection around the perimeter of the lake, and then comes their favorite part of the trip, the well-earned reward for packing cutthroat to such great heights, casting a line to verify catch rate. Most high mountain lakes have a catch rate of 1 fish per hour, but some actually have much better odds than that. And Guerin and Scobie catch 12 trout in 15 minutes.
Oh, there he is.
The cool thing about these mountain lakes is they just don't get the pressure. They're hard to get here. It almost takes a special kind of angler to come up here and take advantage of them. They're not well known like Henry's Lake. Everybody knows about Henry's Lake, but very, very few people know about Brocky Lake. There's lakes all across the state that are good fisheries, but you got to do your legwork to find out where they are and which ones are good fish. And so you got to work to figure them out, and then you got to work to get here. And that really cuts down on the number of folks that use these.
High mountain lakes like Brocky are stocked statewide in the fall. Some regions have hundreds of lakes. This upper Snake region has about 50, managed on a 3-year rotation. And many of these lakes are stocked on foot rather than by air. The bags are opened in shallow water, and the fish slowly swim out. Not all these fish will survive, but most will. They'll retreat to the rocky pockets, get their bearings, and move into their new waterfront property. where they will learn all the tricks that bedevil the hardy anglers who venture up to Brocky Lake.
It's a lot of work, it's a lot of struggle getting up here, but it's also pretty rewarding. You're creating a fishery that somebody's going to come up here and really enjoy when they get here. These high elevation lakes are pretty spectacular. A lot of rocky bluffs and real pretty water. It's a nice lake. Even if you don't catch any fish, you still got fantastic scenery that is worth the hike in itself.
Funding for Outdoor Idaho is made possible by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, by the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moores' legacy of helping to build the great state of Idaho, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.